On him are two marks, a lock of wolf's hair on his shoulder and the morning star on his chest. On him are wondrous marks. On his head are 3 strands of wolf's hair. From his mouth a blue flame licks. On his right hand a sword inscribed. Around it a serpent is coiled. In his teeth he holds a 6-flanged mace. I would say he would be a hero. Welcome to Hamingja. Many of you know that on the Hamingja membership platform we have a master reading list that points pagans in the right direction for what to spend their time and money on reading and what not to. This video is about a new work that will definitely make it on that list. A welcome addition to the otherwise quite forgotten and underestimated Slavic branch of Indo-European spirituality and culture. I'm going to talk about and highlight Stefan Cvetković's new work called Slavic Myths and Epic Poetry, Gods, Symbols and Indo-European Roots of the Heroic Tradition. First of all, Cvetković is an author and artist of Macedonian and Serbian background, nowadays living in France. He's previously written books like Slavic Traditions and Mythology, Volume 1 and 2, great books, and Introduction to European Paganism. He's also the founder of the important but unfortunately somewhat dormant YouTube channel called The World Tree. Over the last few days, I've been reading his brand new book, Slavic Myths and Epic Poetry, Gods, Symbols and Indo-European Roots of the Heroic Tradition. If you are interested in thunder gods, dragon slayers, cosmic order versus chaos, sacred kingship, warrior initiation, or the deeper mythic archetypes that shaped Indo-European tradition and religion, then you're definitely in the right place. But this book is important in so many ways, not just for Slavic studies, not just for folklore lovers, but for anyone trying to understand the spiritual worldview of the Indo-Europeans and how their mythic imagination survived into the modern age. It's also recovering a missing or overlooked branch of the Indo-European mythological tree and showing how the Slavic tradition fits into the spiritual framework we explore here. This new book is not part of the 2-volume series Slavic Traditions and Mythology, but in many ways it serves as a natural continuation, focusing on a more specific topic, epic poetry, and thus complements the series perfectly. Instead of focusing broadly on myth, he zooms in on epic poetry, the living oral tradition where ancient myths were preserved long after the coming of Christianity, statehood and modernity. Cvetković combines South Slavic epic songs, legends and symbolic analysis to reveal the ancient gods and cosmic dramas that survived under the surface of kings, knights and saints. What looks at first like medieval folklore actually carries traces of thunder gods, primordial giants, sacred weapons, dragon slayer cycles, and motifs shared across the entire Indo-European world. The book centers around the mythic figure of Marko Kraljević, Prince Marko, a major character during the period of Ottoman rule over the Balkans and the most popular hero of Serbian poetry and Balkan folklore. Historically, Marko is a 14th century Balkan nobleman, a regional lord and an Ottoman vassal. But Cvetković makes it clear that the Marko of history and the Marko of myth are two different beings. In the epic songs and their living oral tradition, he becomes something else entirely. A rescuer and benefactor of people, a thunderous, larger-than-life warrior. His superhuman strength, his thunderous weapons, colossal horse, and even the landmark stones and sacred springs associated with him. These are not medieval inventions. They are the preserved memory of an older mythic figure, reshaped through millennia of oral creativity. Cvetković situates Marko within the Indo-European heroic model, where a historical figure becomes the vessel for far older mythic archetypes, where the storm and striker god contends with the Primordial Giant, and the epic hero stands between them as mediator and protector of cosmic order. Marko becomes a living remnant of the unified Slavic mythic system, a folk memory of a god hero who once held cosmic significance. It's all preserved fragments of pre-Christian divine mythology. The people remembered him not as a feudal lord, but as a cosmic protector. So these aren't just historical or heroic tales. Behind kings, knights, warriors, and saints, we find ancient gods, cosmic battles, divine helpers, dragon slayers, and mythic archetypes that echo across the entire Indo-European world. And like I said, what Cvetković is doing here is bringing the Slavic branch of that tradition back into the light. So, what does this book do for us readers? Well, first of all, it lifts the Marko cycle out of just local folklore and gives it a true context. This isn't late medieval storytelling. The book shows us that the Marko epics belong to the same symbolic universe as Greek heroic cycles, the Norse saga material, the Baltic thunder god mythology, the Iranian heroic poetry, etc. It is about understanding the inherited symbolic language of Indo-European peoples across millennia. It also addresses a widespread mythological misconception. For centuries, scholars claim that Slavic mythology was lost because it lacked ancient written texts. And Cvetković shows that this idea is not only wrong, but backwards. The Slavs preserved their myths in exactly the medium where Indo-European peoples most reliably preserved them: epic poetry and heroic tradition. By analyzing those songs with comparative Indo-European tools, he reconstructs the deeper patterns that many scholars refuse to look for, and Cvetković has done that before. Slavic epic is not an outlier, it's a full participant in the Indo-European mythic tradition. In that sense, this book also teaches a very important lesson, something I also bring up often, not the least to new pagans and people who've been brought up in a Judeo-Christian context, like so many of us have. That if we're trying to understand and practice Indo-European paganism only based on written down holy scriptures, then we have a huge problem. Spirituality and myth doesn't require manuscripts. There is no Bible for pagans. Instead, we have to learn from myth, from stories, poetry, rituals, history, anthropology, linguistics, etymology, comparative religious studies, etc. That's how Indo-European myth survived before writing appeared. As Cvetković puts it, understanding myth is not just about collecting evidence, it's about cultivating the ability to see the ancient pattern shining through. And that's exactly what he's doing here. This book also does a cultural service. It sheds new light on the deeper roots and meanings of Slavic mythology. And by re-examining South Slavic epic through Indo-European mythic structure, it connects Slavic heritage to the oldest Indo-European religious strata and breathes life back into stories whose cosmic meaning was nearly forgotten. It is therefore rescuing the Slavic tradition from erasure and placing it back among its ancient linguistic and mythological relatives. And it is here that the book really shines. Cvetković argues that the Slavic tradition preserves entire structures of Indo-European religion, like the thunderous battling dragons or obstructive giants, the divine warrior who restores order after cosmic theft, the sacred horse with the supernatural abilities, the psychopomp figure, kingship defined by cosmic legitimacy rather than earthly power, and many other things. Throughout the book, Cvetković is essentially saying the Indo-Europeans carried their stories, symbols and cosmology into every land they settled. And the South Slavs preserved more of this than we ever realized. In other words, the Indo-European mythic world did not vanish. It was and is a portable cosmology, always taking new forms, like in songs, poems, themes, folk rites, heroic legends, and so on. There are two things I wish Cvetković would have done differently, and they both have to do with creativity. To begin with, the author would have made it easier for himself to keep the reader throughout the 360 plus pages if there were a bit more variation and playfulness in how he approaches and presents all this. A less uniform and, dare I say, monotonous method, structure and narrative. The second thing is that he, as an artist who already paints motifs from these myths, of course should have added several of his paintings and illustrations to the book, already existing ones or creating new ones. That would have added more atmosphere and personal touch to this project. It would have been nicer. That said, this is definitely an important book for those interested in Indo-European spirituality and culture in general, and Slavic myth and poetry in particular. And a book that has a natural place on Hamingja's master reading list. Again, the Slavic branch has been overlooked and forgotten about. Marko Kraljević's legend and this book is something far more than just folklore and the study of it. It opens a doorway into something much larger. Cvetković shows us that the story of Prince Marko is in fact the survival of a deep Indo-European mythic structure, despite Christian and historical overlays. The underlying pagan architecture remains visible. These songs preserve a mythic universe, not merely a poetic one. Deep Indo-European mythological structures that have survived for millennia. And by illuminating and highlighting this, Cvetković has done us all a tremendous favor.